Today's topic is a brief introduction of Guru Rinpoche. On August 6th, His Holiness gave a teaching on the practice of Guru Rinpoche at the Padmasambhava Dharma Center. It was quite a challenge to track down the materials for this session. Yesterday, Yvon shared his own perspective, but today I will be speaking from my own position. This lecture was really hard to find. The person who provided it was the one who drove for His Holiness back then. Because he had to find parking before the teaching, he missed a small part at the very beginning. However, the rest of the content is fairly complete, and I would like to share it with all of you here. We are so fortunate to have this material, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to find it in New York. Later, I also went to the Jonang Center and gave a talk there, but back then many things were simply not preserved. The preservation of records and materials becomes incredibly important after many years have passed. My teachings might not be anything extraordinary, but since I've spent my entire life dedicated to this, perhaps they hold some value. Usually, after someone passes away, people tend to place more value on their related records. That is often the case. So I am truly grateful to those who, over the years, have preserved the audio, video, and written transcripts. I want to express my special thanks to all of you, even though some of you volunteers might not be able to get official certificates like Khenpo or Dharma teacher degrees when you return, because it's so hard to pass the exams. But regardless, there is nothing I can do about that. Many of us are in the same boat. It's just the way it is. But perhaps it doesn't matter. Maybe you have a deeper connection to spreading the Dharma. I see how hard our volunteers work. They spend so much time in preparation, including those in the control room. Everything must be ready beforehand, and while the teaching is happening, they hardly get a chance to actually listen to the Dharma because their minds are completely focused on their tasks. Even after it's over, they have a lot to do. Some of the equipment is very heavy. For someone like me, it's quite a struggle just to lift them. I'm truly grateful to everyone who has served so selflessly for so long. Take that driver, for instance. At the time, we never imagined how helpful he would turn out to be. Even at many of the large centers in New York, their archives were eventually lost. This is all that remains. Some other recordings became unusable, and many of mine, like I mentioned yesterday, could not be used in the end. In this class, His Holiness began with an introduction. As you know, the driver had to park the car first. He also mentioned yesterday that since it was an ambient recording, the quality isn't great. Sometimes it's hard to fathom. A driver... You see, back in 1986, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche visited my hometown of Upper Lokoma. Last year, I asked many people there if they had any recordings or photos. Back then, there was nothing, even regarding what His Holiness taught. Beyond what a few lamas with good memories could recall, there is absolutely nothing. All that remains is the house where he stayed. I spent hundreds of thousands to buy that house just to preserve it. There is only a bed inside, nothing else. At the time, we really hoped to leave behind not just physical things, but his legacy of wisdom. His Holiness taught for 2 or 3 days back then. It's such a pity we couldn't find any records. But sometimes Westerners are quite remarkable. Take this driver. He realized that His Holiness was someone very rare, so he made his own recording. In the end, we can now present this Guru Rinpoche practice. This particular practice of Guru Rinpoche is like a mind terma of His Holiness. It is truly extraordinary. I believe that through this connection, one can sometimes feel the inconceivability of it all. Now, how should you adjust your motivation? You can adjust your mind by following either of the two motivations, the vast motivation of the Bodhisattvayana and the motivation of the secret mantrayana that is endowed with vast skillful means. The vast motivation of the Bodhisattvayana. His Holiness begins from this point. The preceding parts were likely the titles, including the homage to the Buddha. There might have been some of that, we don't know for sure. One should adjust through the vast motivation of the Bodhisattvayana, as well as the secret mantrayana endowed with vast skillful means. In the words of my perfect teacher, we speak of profound and vast. But here, His Holiness uses the term vast for both. It is perfectly fine to call it vast as well. You can adjust your mind by following either of these two motivations. First of all, what is the vast motivation of the Bodhisattvayana? How do you develop this vast motivation of the Bodhisattvayana? Just as space pervades everywhere, sentient beings exist everywhere. Wherever there are sentient beings, there are negative karma and afflictions. We recite similar words in the prose section of the King of Aspiration Prayers. Wherever there are negative karma and afflictions, there is endless resultant suffering. All sentient beings who are experiencing endless suffering without exception have been your mother and father since beginningless time. They have all played that role. Of course, there might be individual cases where parents were not very kind to you, but generally speaking, parents are indeed very kind. Even if they weren't perfect, they chose not to abandon you when you were born. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the chance to live in this world. You were so fragile back then. So when some people say, my parents were mean to me since I was a child, I don't want to repay them, it's actually a reflection of your own character. Think about it. If they were truly that heartless, they could have just thrown you in the trash. How would you have the life you have today? That wouldn't be possible. This truth is stated very clearly by the Buddha in various sutras, including the Brahma Net Sutra and Avatamsaka Sutra. It is explained very clearly. When all sentient beings were your mother or father, they were no different from your present parents. They treated you with their purest hearts and kindest care to bring you up. Their kindness is immense. Though these benevolent parents want to attain happiness, they don't know the causes for it is to accumulate virtue and practice wholesome Dharma. Though they want to rid themselves of suffering, they constantly create the causes for suffering. What they wish for and what they actually do are always contradictory. Therefore, what kind of motivation should we generate? How wonderful it would be if all miserable sentient beings could be freed from any kind of suffering. This is the intention of compassion. When we cultivate compassion, this is how we should think. Constantly thinking of the suffering beings in the world, we must help them be free from such pain. As for loving kindness, when we have the thought of getting sentient beings out of suffering, what else should we evoke? The kind wish to place them in the state of perfect peace and happiness, such as physical health and mental joyfulness. Nowadays, physical health is very important. It seems different from before. Many people place great emphasis on wellness and longevity, right? And mental joyfulness as well. As practitioners, if we have studied Buddhism, we shouldn't have major psychological issues. Otherwise, our Buddhist practice isn't really working. So as Buddhists, as ordained people, we shouldn't let our mental state go wrong. It should be like what I mentioned a few days ago, being sociable and getting along with others. Because in today's world, I've noticed that in the cities and even among our Tibetan youth, there are many people with psychological problems. They might feel full of confidence on the surface, as if nothing is wrong, but in their actions, their minds still show all kinds of issues. I don't know if it's the diet, the computers, the internet, or the phones, I'm not sure. They think they are fine, but as soon as they face a tiny bit of stress, they can't take it. This is actually a psychological issue. As human beings, we should at least have a little bit of resilience. But without proper practice or good mental cultivation, it's sometimes hard to endure. Nowadays, people usually, I think, what I say is perfectly fine, but when I speak like this, many people think, oh, he's definitely talking about me. Why is he saying that to me? In front of so many people, it's so obvious. They start, not just this time, but he also scolded me yesterday and a few days ago. And on June 23rd, he spoke about me again. They remember all of these very clearly. Sometimes they seem perfectly normal one moment, with great memory and eloquence, and their way of thinking is very, very sharp. But when they encounter problems, or cannot bear even the slightest provocation, then for them, abandoning Dharma texts or the 3 jewels becomes no issue at all. Sometimes looking at people, they all seem the same on the surface. But when you interact with them, some are very steady and pose no danger. Others are indeed dangerous characters. You can't tell from the outside, but after interacting for a long time, you realize they are actually quite dangerous. Once they can't accept something mentally, they might not care at all about themselves or others. They simply don't care. In that case, karma means even less to them. We usually talk about karmic retribution. But for them, cause and effect is nothing. So I really hope that all sentient beings can maintain a relatively stable mind, even if you can't accomplish much and haven't achieved much in study and practice. At least you aren't destructive, right? There are indeed such people. If one isn't destructive, they bring no disaster to those around them. It provides a sense of safety, which is good. So we must think this way and make this aspiration ourselves. Actually, this is simple. I often think, oh no, will I become mentally ill in my old age? If that happens, it would be better to die quickly. Otherwise, for a Dharma teacher to end up like that might be bad for the Dharma. Many people today seem to misunderstand the Dharma. Actually, if you truly understand the principles we discussed today, it has nothing to do with the Dharma itself. For example, if I explain the truth well while I am healthy, that truth is acceptable. It should be accepted. But if I get sick and behave differently, that really shouldn't affect the Dharma. Nowadays, many say, because that guru did such and such, or because that Buddhist did such and such. If you generate wrong views toward the Dharma because of a person, it actually shows that this person never really had true faith in the Dharma. If the Dharma has already integrated into your heart, people don't necessarily have a direct relation to it. They are just speaking about it, just one member among those who believe in Buddha. It's not as if the Dharma and the person are now fused together. Now many lay practitioners say, because that Buddhist's fundraising was shady, or because that Buddhist's conduct was not in accordance with Dharma, therefore I have lost faith in the Dharma. Actually, your faith was gone long ago. It is that simple. So your mind has not integrated into the Dharma at all. If your mind were integrated into the Dharma, then even if the whole world fell into chaos, your faith would not change in the slightest. This is also a distinction. Here we speak of a kind motivation. However, an existence or a birth in the three lower realms is never endowed with peace and happiness. Beings in the celestial and human realms may experience a certain level of happiness, but it is temporary and not long-lasting because it is subject to change. Since they experience suffering when happiness declines, such happiness is insubstantial. Such being the case, it will not bring sentient beings much benefit by placing them in the higher realms of gods and humans. Further, you should have a more deliberate consideration. Even if you get them out of samsara, freeing them from its causes that are karma and affliction, as well as its effect that is suffering, and helping them attain the fruition of the Shravakas or Pratyeka Buddhas, it is still less beneficial and not of the utmost meaning. This is because although Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas have achieved enlightenment that brings the highest level of self-benefit and enables them to enjoy great peace and happiness, their attachment to the extreme of one-sided peace prevents them from vastly benefiting others. So placing sentient beings in those states is not of the greatest significance. Therefore, with the wisdom of realizing the selflessness of the individual and of phenomena, you can eradicate the suffering of samsara from the very root. With great compassion, you will not remain in one-sided peace, and with wisdom you will not remain in samsara, but will benefit sentient beings throughout space. In order to achieve such a result, you should generate the supreme bodhicitta that aspires to place all sentient beings in the state of perfect Buddhahood that transcends the two extremes of existence and peace. This is the fruition of Buddhahood. When we generate bodhicitta, this is how we should always think. The fruition of Buddhahood does not appear without proper causes and conditions. You need to be trained in its fully endowed causes to bring it to maturity. What are these causes? They are fully endowed discipline, fully endowed meditative absorption, and fully endowed wisdom. Discipline, meditation, and wisdom. Previously in questions and answers, I recall someone asking me, can you summarize all the content of Buddhism for me immediately into 3 words? I think I just blurted out discipline, meditation, wisdom. I believe it was included in the transcripts later. Sometimes in Q&A you can come up with answers immediately, but sometimes it is difficult. First, fully endowed discipline. How do you observe pure discipline? Observing the vows of pratimoksha is to avoid harming other sentient beings from the very root. Observing the bodhisattva vows is to aspire to benefit all sentient beings, irrespective of how many eons it may take or how huge their numbers are. His Holiness used very simple words, yet he spoke the key points. He gave us a summary. If people ask what are the Bodhisattva vows, what are the Pratimoksha vows, or what are the secret Mantrayana vows, we can say this: that which accomplishes the twofold benefit of self and others easily and swiftly is the samayas of secret Mantrayana. In terms of easily and swiftly, easily means you can attain the state of great bliss while enjoying all pleasures of the five senses at will and without having to abandon them. This is called easily. Swiftly means you are able to attain the state of Vajradharahood within this short lifetime in the age of degeneration without having to undergo long-term ascetic practices. This defines the discipline of the secret Mantrayana. What is fully endowed meditative absorption? Resting the mind single-pointedly is called meditative absorption. The pith instructions for resting the mind, actually in the way of the Bodhisattva, the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, and gateway to knowledge, it is explained in many texts. Eliminating the 5 faults, relying upon the 8 recognitions, and practicing the 9 methods of placement. What is the result? The 9 successive absorptions, that is the 9 stages of meditative absorption. This is also found in the Abhidharma Kosha. A detailed introduction to them can be found in Maitreya's treatises. If explained according to pith instructions, observing the mind with your own mind and resting in its natural state, gradually pacifying all conceptual thoughts, is called meditative absorption. What is Chan? What is Ding? His Holiness explained it very well. Observing the mind with the mind, resting naturally. This is spoken from the perspective of pith instructions. Do you understand meditation? If you don't understand meditation, just observe the mind with the mind, rest naturally, and then stop all conceptual thoughts. Nowadays, in many places in the Han region, people practice Chan often. People abroad also really like this kind of meditation. In many universities, faculty and students practice this way. In the future, if you can't teach anything else, you can teach them meditation. Just sitting there for an hour or two is also fine. Instead of generating waves of conceptual thoughts, it is better to rest for a while. It's quite good. Everyone should meditate like this. This is His Holiness's teaching on fully endowed meditative absorption, fully endowed wisdom. There are 3 types of wisdom. Wisdom that comes from hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Wisdom that comes from hearing is cultivated by clearly listening to the teachings of sutras and tantras in front of qualified spiritual teachers. It requires a qualified teacher and listening clearly, not listening in a daze, dozing off now and then, seeming to remember, and then after it's over, asking what was said today. It seems he said something. I forgot it all. I left it all in the shrine room. I've forgotten everything. It shouldn't be like that, especially regarding the teachings you will implement in actual practice. If you want to achieve accomplishment in one lifetime, you must listen carefully to the practical instructions. What is wisdom from contemplation? We are very proficient in this, as found in the wish-fulfilling treasury. It is cultivated by repeatedly reflecting on the words and the meaning of what you have received. You must dispel all darkness of not understanding, misunderstanding, and doubt. Regarding not understanding and misunderstanding, we discuss this in the Treasury of Logic, as you remember. You must gain certainty about the reality. Wisdom that comes through meditation is cultivated by integrating the meaning that has completely dispelled any doubt you might have through repeated meditation. You repeatedly practice the Dharma meaning about which you have no doubts. You repeatedly habituate yourself to it. This is meditation. There is a slight difference between contemplation and meditation. Longchenpa's The Wish-Fulfilling Treasury distinguishes them. Actually, contemplation, repeated thinking, is somewhat similar to analytical meditation. But for meditation, once you have finished resolving doubts through the process of hearing and contemplation, you take what has been clearly extracted and constantly brew it, constantly practice it. This is meditation. When meditating, you cannot have various doubts, otherwise you haven't reached the stage of meditation. At that stage, doubt should be completely eliminated. When you are contemplating, you can have various doubts, debates, and discussions. That is allowed during the phase of contemplation. But when meditating, you should have a clear view, free from all darkness of doubt, and practice based on that. This is called meditation. So you must practice these causes for attaining Buddhahood, the threefold trainings of discipline, meditation, and wisdom. This time here, you should adjust your motivation to receive a pure teaching. Okay, we will stop here.
Padmasambhava